I dialed again, the heart monitor beeping in sync with my silence as voicemail answered for the fourth time. My ribs ached from the fall, but not as much as the quiet from my son's end of the line. While I lay bruised and alone in a hospital bed, he was on Instagram, grinning in front of a house I co-signed for. Finally home, his caption said. Home. The word scraped like gravel. I gave him life, shelter, decades of unconditional. And still, not a visit. Not a question. Just silence, dressed in Wi-Fi and filtered smiles. So I made the call he never did. I removed him from the documents, from the decisions, from the legacy. Not out of revenge, out of clarity. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The beeping of the heart monitor was steady, indifferent. The IV line ran clear into her bruised arm, taped down with translucent plastic that puckered her skin. Joanne blinked against the harsh fluorescent light above her, blinking again until it stopped feeling like an interrogation. On the tray table beside her, her phone screen lit up. No answer. She tapped call again. It rang 4 times, straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. He never listened to those anyway. Outside the hospital window, the September sky looked washed out and hollow, like everything else lately. Joanne sank back against the elevated bed and exhaled. Her ribs ached from the fall, stairs slippery with rain, no railing. The admitting nurse had written it up as an accident. Joanne wasn't so sure anymore. She opened her text thread with Michael, thumb hovering. Please call me, I'm admitted. She hit send. 3 dots flickered for a second, then stopped. A quiet knock at the door. A young nurse walked in, cheerful in that soft, professionally sympathetic way. Her badge read Kara, pink scrubs printed with little stethoscopes. How's your pain, Miss Farrell? Manageable, Joanne lied. Kara checked the drip, scribbled something on a tablet. Your son hasn't checked in yet? Joanne didn't answer, just shook her head. Kara offered a polite smile, pity glazed in professionalism. Sometimes they get overwhelmed. We see it a lot. Joanne forced a tight-lipped smile. He's just busy. The nurse nodded and left, pulling the door softly shut behind her. Joanne waited until her footsteps faded before she turned her phone back on. Still no missed calls, but Michael had been busy, on Instagram. She opened his profile, public, curated, superficial, new post, 15 minutes ago, him standing in front of the house she co-signed for last year. Holding a glass of champagne, smirking. Caption, finally home. First house blessed. She stared at the photo. The porch light glowed behind him. The stone path she had helped choose. He hadn't even invited her to see it. She'd found out about the purchase after the closing. Joanne swallowed hard. She zoomed in on the image until the pixels bled into nonsense. Her hand trembled slightly. She wasn't sure if it was the painkillers or just the kind of betrayal that made your organs fold in on themselves. He hadn't even texted back. The hospital TV hung silently from the ceiling mount. Joanne didn't turn it on. She didn't need the noise. Her mind was loud enough. She'd always told herself it wasn't her place to intrude. That Michael was a grown man now, with his own life. But when had it turned into this hollow occasional sonship? A birthday call if she was lucky. A Mother's Day flower delivery arranged by an assistant. She reached for the call button, then stopped. Instead, she opened her notes app, started typing. Michael's medical proxy needs to be removed. New POA, none, not yet. Call Marcus about will revision, Monday. Her thumb hovered, a beat. Then she typed one more line. He doesn't come when I'm sick. He won't come when I'm dead. A dry laugh escaped her throat. She deleted the sentence. The intercom buzzed softly. Dinner tray incoming, room 314. Joanne ignored it. Her stomach felt like it belonged to someone else. Everything did. Another buzz, her phone this time. Text from Michael. Sorry, crazy day. You okay? That was it. Not what hospital, Not, do you need anything? Just a feeble 2-second afterthought sandwiched between selfies and hashtags. She didn't respond. Instead, she clicked the side button. Screen dark. Outside, dusk was falling. The sky looked like a bruise blooming across the horizon. Joanne turned her face to the wall. The monitor kept beeping. Her hand lay limp beside the call button, but she didn't press it. Instead, she closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, let herself picture the version of her life where Michael didn't win. The clock ticked into darkness, like it was trying to outlast her. 9:42 p.m. The light above Joanne's hospital bed glowed dimmer now, shifted to night mode. Outside, the hallway was muted except for the occasional soft squeak of rubber soles and the distant clatter of a rolling cart. She stared at the doorway like it might open on its own. Her phone, dark and lifeless, lay on her chest, screened to the ceiling. The battery had died an hour ago, somewhere between checking Michael's stories and refreshing her messages one last time, just in case, just to be sure. He hadn't come. He hadn't even asked where she was. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and the leftover chicken broth she hadn't touched. Her ribs still throbbed, but the painkillers were holding it underwater, dull, floaty, disconnected. She let her eyes wander the ceiling tile grid like it might answer a question she hadn't dared to ask. A quiet knock broke the silence. Nurse Kara again. Her voice was hushed now, softened by the hour. "Want me to plug that in for you?" she asked, gesturing to the phone. Joanne hesitated, then nodded. Kara gently lifted it and tucked the charger in like she was tucking in a child. A red battery icon pulsed once, then disappeared. "Let me know if you need anything, okay?" Joanne gave a small nod. "Thanks." When Kara left, the room seemed to fold in tighter around her. The air felt heavier now, not suffocating but close. She waited for the buzz of a notification, a vibration, anything. Nothing came. The silence stretched until it became something alive. The door cracked open again, but this time it wasn't a nurse. It was Nina. Hair damp from the rain, hoodie zipped up to her chin, canvas bag on one shoulder. Her face broke into relief and concern at once. "Oh my God," she said softly. "Joe, I came as soon as I heard." Joanne's mouth twitched. "That's one of us." Nina's brow furrowed as she approached the bed. "He hasn't come?" Joanne didn't answer. "No call?" Nina pressed. "Not even a text." Joanne just shook her head, slow and deliberate. That was all Nina needed. "Oh, screw that," Nina said, tossing her bag into the corner chair. "That is not busy. That is absent." Joanne tried to smile, but it didn't land. "You'd think the first hospital visit in 5 years might warrant a phone call." Nina sat at the edge of the bed and took her hand. "You gave that boy everything." Joanne looked down at her wrist, bruised under the IV tape. "Everything I had and then more." "Then stop letting him write the ending," Nina said flatly. Joanne blinked. The silence held between them like a held breath. Outside, a wheelchair rolled by. The hallway light cast a long moving shadow under the door, then disappeared again. The room stilled. "I updated my notes app," Joanne murmured. "Made a few changes." Nina glanced over. "What kind of changes?" "Will, proxy, power of attorney." She turned to look at her friend. "He's not listed anymore." For a beat, Nina just looked at her, and then, "Good." Joanne let the words sink in. Good. She hadn't expected it to feel like anything, but it did. A quiet reclaiming, like unlocking a door that had been nailed shut for years. "I want to make it official," she said, "not just in the notes app." Nina nodded without hesitation. "We'll call Marcus tomorrow. I'll drive you." Joanne exhaled slowly, ribcage tight with pain and purpose. "I can't do this anymore. Not the waiting, not the pretending." "Then don't." Another silence, but this one wasn't hollow. It was grounding. The phone chimed suddenly. One dull vibration on the metal tray table. Joanne reached for it, breath caught. She tapped the screen, bank alert. Nothing from Michael. She set the phone down, face down this time. Nina reached for the room's laminated whiteboard, where someone had doodled a crooked smiley face under today's goals. She picked up the dry erase marker and erased it with a sharp stroke. Joanne watched her. "What are you doing?" "Rewriting the day," Nina said. "Goal number 1, stop calling ghosts." Joanne smiled for the first time since the fall. Small, hollowed out, but real. The door creaked again, and they both turned. But it was just another nurse doing rounds. He glanced in, gave a nod, and moved on. Joanne leaned her head back against the pillow. Her chest rose with something deeper than breath. Tomorrow she'd start the process. Remove Michael from everything. Her emergency contact, her medical directive, her financial files. He wouldn't see the room he left her in. He wouldn't see any of it coming. Joanne stared at the phone as if it were a live thing. The battery icon blinked green now, full and smug. Morning sunlight spilled through the half-open blinds, slicing the hospital room into cold geometry. The world had moved forward without her. Michael had too. She tapped the thread one last time. Still no new message. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard, then typed, "Call me if you care at all." Send. A silence followed that felt radioactive. She stared at the screen until her eyes burned. Then it came, the confirmation, read, 7:06 a.m. No reply, no typing dots, no apology, no, on my way, just silence, and that cold little word, read. Her stomach turned in on itself. A soft knock broke the stillness. Nurse Cara peeked in with a tray. "Morning, Miss Farrell." Joanne tried to sit up straighter, pain pinching her side. "Morning." Cara wheeled the breakfast tray over. Eggs, dry toast, and a little square of butter that hadn't melted. "Need help getting set up?" Joanne shook her head. "No, I'm okay." The nurse nodded and stepped back. "Your discharge paperwork's in process. Should be ready within the hour." Joanne offered a faint smile. "Thanks." Once Cara was gone, Joanne stared at the eggs like they were someone else's problem. The fork lay untouched. She couldn't remember the last time food had felt like something other than obligation. The door opened again. No knock this time. Nina. Same hoodie, darker under the arms now, hair pulled into a messy twist like she hadn't gone home. She didn't say hello. She didn't have to. "You're getting out today," she said, dropping into the chair. "Soon." Joanne nodded slowly, eyes still on the untouched tray. "I texted Marcus already," Nina said. "Told him to clear the afternoon." Joanne's lips pressed into a line. "You think he'll take the call?" "He'll take yours," Nina replied. "And if he doesn't, I'll sit on his front porch until he does." Joanne almost smiled. Almost. Nina reached over and moved the tray table aside. "You didn't eat." "Not hungry." "Pain meds still holding?" "They're enough." Nina tilted her head, studying her friend. "You look like you didn't sleep." Joanne's eyes flicked back to the phone. Nina followed the gaze. Still nothing. Joanne didn't answer. "I think," Nina said slowly, "it's time to stop offering him the floor." Joanne said nothing. She picked up her phone instead, unlocked it, opened her contacts, scrolled until she saw his name, Michael. She held her finger on it. Delete contact. She stared at the option for a long moment, then tapped. The name vanished. All that was left was a bare number, 10 digits. No warmth, no title, just math. Nina watched silently. Joanne exhaled. "Now it's just a stranger with my blood type." There was nothing dramatic about it. Nothing cathartic, just absence. But it was a beginning. "I'm proud of you," Nina said quietly. "I'm not," Joanne replied. "Not yet." The nurse returned with a clipboard and an armful of papers. "All right, Miss Farrell, let's get you out of here." An hour later, they stepped into the bright morning outside. Joanne flinched at the light. It was too sharp, too real. Everything smelled like car exhaust and wet concrete and overwatered planters baking in the sun. Her hospital wristband still clung to her skin, the ink slightly smeared. Nina opened the passenger door. You good? Joanne hesitated, then slid in. The seat felt unfamiliar, her body too stiff for the world she was re-entering. She buckled the belt, staring straight ahead. Nina got in and started the engine. The radio kicked on low, someone talking about midweek traffic and pumpkin spice returning too early. Anywhere else you want to go before Marcus? Nina asked. Joanne turned her head. Yeah, home. I need 5 minutes to collect what's left of me. Then we do that, Nina said, shifting into drive. Joanne leaned her head against the glass. The city passed in blurred blocks. Stores she didn't recognize. Restaurants she used to visit when Michael still called her Mom instead of Joe. The phone buzzed in her bag. She didn't reach for it. Nina glanced over. You gonna check that? Joanne shook her head. If it matters, it'll call back. She closed her eyes and for the first time in weeks, imagined a life without permission. The kitchen still smelled faintly like hospital antiseptic and old lemons. Joanne sat at the table in the same cardigan she'd left in before the fall, now washed and draped loosely over her frame like it didn't belong to her anymore. Across from her, Grant Wallace, her estate attorney of 22 years, adjusted his reading glasses and opened the folder she'd slid across the table. He skimmed page 1 of the existing will. Michael's name appeared in bold at least 5 times. Trustee, power of attorney. Sole beneficiary. Every title, every trust, every clause pointed to a son who couldn't bother to text her back. Grant looked up. You want full removal? Joanne didn't hesitate. Forever. His eyes didn't question her. Not after the voicemail she'd left that morning. Not after the hospital. He simply nodded and flipped to a blank form. The scratch of his pen was the only sound in the room for a while. Joanne stared at the sugar bowl. It was half full, chipped along the edge. Michael had broken it once when he was 9, trying to sneak a spoonful for cereal when he thought she wasn't looking. She'd kept it all these years like some kind of artifact. Now it just looked like evidence. Will trust, health proxy, Grant murmured as he worked. We'll list a secondary for emergency contact. Do you want to assign someone for end-of-life decisions, or… Nina, she said quietly, if she's willing. Grant nodded. She's not family, though. There's a separate clause to cover that. She's more than he ever was, Joanne said flatly. The pen paused mid-stroke. He glanced at her. I gave him 49 years, she added. He gave me 48 hours of nothing. Grant didn't speak, just went back to writing. The sound of birds chirping outside the window felt like mockery. Joanne glanced out. The same garden beds she'd once hoped Michael would inherit. He'd once helped her plant tomatoes when he was 10. Said he'd always take care of the place when she was gone. Now she couldn't even picture him walking through the front gate without feeling sick. Her phone buzzed against the table. Joanne flinched. For a second, some stubborn, aching part of her hoped it was him. That he'd cracked, shown up, apologized, begged. But it wasn't Michael, it was Kelsey, her daughter-in-law. Text, he told me you're being dramatic. Are you okay? Joanne stared at it. Dramatic, like her ribs weren't still wrapped in bruises. Like she hadn't sat in a hospital bed watching the sunset twice, without a single visit from the man she raised. She set the phone down without typing a word. No response felt loud enough. Grant slid the first draft across the table. Take your time with this. I'll notarize, once you're sure. I'm sure, she said, picking up the pen. He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a thick envelope. Also, just a heads up. The trust account still names him as contingent executor. That one's trickier to revise. Not impossible, just layered. Joanne nodded. Do it anyway. He hesitated. You know this may trigger some escalation, legal pushback if he finds out. Let him push, she said. I'm done building ladders for him to climb back in. She signed the first page. Grant nodded, collecting the documents in careful stacks. I'll process this by Friday. He paused at the door. You want me to alert him legally, or do you want it to be quiet for now? Joanne looked back at the sugar bowl. The crack had spidered wider than she remembered. Make it quiet, she said. For now. He left with a soft click of the door. Joanne sat still, sunlight inching across the tile toward her bare feet. Another buzz, another text. Kelsey again. He said maybe you're just mad we didn't invite you to the house. Is that what this is? Joanne stared at the message until her fingers curled. Then slowly she opened her contact list. Not Michael's number, but hers, Kelsey's. She tapped edit, deleted the name. 10 digits, no label, just noise. She slid the phone away from her, then reached for the folder again. There were more names to erase, and she was just getting started. The document sat on the table like a sealed future. Stiff paper, sharp ink. Joanne could feel the weight of it through her fingertips as she traced the edge of the top page. Final will and testament. Her name printed in heavy serif. The new date marked in fresh black, September 15th. Across the table, Grant's voice was steady. You understand the terms as we've laid them out? Joanne nodded. Michael Farrell is removed entirely. No inheritance, no decision-making authority, no trustee privileges. Yes, she said. Kelsey Farrell remains as contingent heir, not for your primary estate, but for the small personal trust, capped at $25,000. Distribution held until she turns 45 or shows proof of professional financial counseling. Joanne's lips curved faintly. She always did think I was dramatic. Let her work for the drama. Grant chuckled under his breath. The rest, per your directive, is to be transferred to the Ridgeway Foundation for Elder Justice. Full disbursement within 90 days of death. No memorial service required unless otherwise specified by your executor. Which is Nina, Joanne added. He nodded. And she's agreed. Joanne sat a little straighter. Her ribs still ached, but her spine felt newly present. And the health proxy. You're no longer in the system as Michael's dependent, nor is he yours. Nina's been named with full authority for medical decisions. Power of attorney transfers to her effective immediately for all emergency use. He tapped the final page. This version is airtight, Joe. No contest clause, no legal wiggle room. You could fall off the grid today and no one could touch a cent. She picked up the pen and signed without hesitation. Each letter of her name felt like closure written in cursive. When she was done, Grant stacked the papers carefully and slid them into a red-sealed envelope. You want to deliver the letter now, or wait? Joanne reached into the side drawer of her desk and pulled out a handwritten sheet, her legacy letter, cream stationery, blue ink, neat print, no theatrics. She slid it across to him. I don't want to fight, she said. I want a record. He glanced at the first line, then nodded and tucked it in with the will. It's all there. Joanne leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel vindicated. But for the first time in years, she felt unhooked from the weight of trying. The front door creaked open, and Nina stepped inside, raincoat draped over her arm and a grocery bag in hand. That it? Joanne looked over. Signed, sealed, done. Nina placed the bag on the counter and walked over, glancing at the now empty signature line. How's it feel? Joanne exhaled slowly. Like I just burned down a house no one lived in. Nina rested a hand on her shoulder. You disconnected him with Grace. Joanne gave a dry laugh. Grace wasn't the word I had in mind. It fits, Nina said. You could have gutted him. You didn't. Joanne didn't answer. She turned to the small wooden hutch behind her desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a shoebox, taped once along the edge. She pulled off the lid. Inside, a single photo. Michael, 7 months old. Gummy smile, blue footy pajamas, one sock already half off. Her hand was visible in the edge of the frame, young, steady, supporting his back. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she closed the box again. Not the trash, not the fire, just a drawer. The kind you don't open without a reason. She slid it shut. The phone buzzed on the counter. A text again. Kelsey. She didn't check it. Nina glanced over. More shade? Joanne shrugged. More silence wearing sunglasses. She stood up, a little shaky but upright. Let's get something in the crock pot. Something he hated. Spaghetti squash, Nina offered. Joanne smirked. Perfect. As they moved toward the kitchen, the envelope sat on the desk. Red seal unbroken. Final, untouchable. And inside it, a message Michael wouldn't read until it was too late. Joanne tapped the message once to open it. Kelsey's name stared back, like it wanted to be a person again. I heard what you did. I understand. Joanne stared at those 5 words. Understand. Understand what? The nights in the hospital with no call, no face, no voice. The years of pretending her son's coldness was just modern detachment. The echoing silence that only grew sharper each time she reached out. She tapped the trash icon and watched the message vanish. No reply. She didn't owe them a single more thing. Outside, the mailbox creaked as she pulled it open. One hand clutched the manila envelope she'd sealed that morning. Inside, a notarized copy of her revised estate letter, addressed to Grant's office. She wanted it backed up on neutral ground. Safe, secure, recorded. She slid it into the outgoing slot and let the metal lid drop. That sound, solid, decisive, felt like a period at the end of a long, dragged-out sentence. Inside, the house was quiet. Still, the kind of quiet that used to ache. Now it hummed with possibility. Nina arrived just after noon, balancing a paper bag and a plastic thermos. Surprise lunch. And no, you don't get to veto it. Joanne smiled as she held the door open. Is it edible? Barely, Nina said. But it's hot and not from a hospital tray. They sat at the kitchen island, cross-legged and leaning in. Tomato soup, grilled cheese with the crust cut off. Joanne took a bite, and for the first time in nearly a week, her appetite showed up without being summoned. Nina clinked her spoon against the bowl. You know, I haven't heard you laugh since the fall. Joanne tilted her head. I haven't had much reason to. Well, buckle up, Nina said, because I registered us both for something. Joanne arched an eyebrow. What now? Tuesday mornings, community center, intro to memoir and journaling, first sessions free. Joanne blinked. Nina added quickly, you don't have to write about him. You don't even have to write about you. You can make stuff up, change names, whatever. I just thought. I'll go, Joanne said. Nina froze, halfway through dunking her sandwich. Joanne smiled. If I'm starting over, I may as well document it. Later, Joanne sat in the den with a blank notebook on her lap. The air smelled like rosemary from the bush near the front step, the breeze threading it through the screen. She wrote one word at the top of the page. Permission. Underneath, she began to list things she no longer owed. Justification for what I keep. Guilt for what I let go. Apologies for healing. The doorbell didn't ring that day. Her phone didn't buzz. There were no more dramatic texts, no indirect guilt trips, no calls from Michael demanding explanation, only stillness and space. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the neighbor's gables, her inbox chimed once. A new email from Kelsey. Subject line, no drama, just me. Joanne opened it. I heard what you did. I want to say I understand. Truly, I do. I grew up with a mother who cut me off. I know how it hurts. If I ever contributed to yours, I'm sorry. I won't reach out again unless you want me to. But I needed to say it. That's all. Joanne read it twice. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a slap. It was quieter than she expected. More human. But it still didn't change anything. She hit reply and typed 4 lines. Kelsey, I don't need understanding. I just need peace. Thank you for your honesty. Joanne. She hovered over the send button, then hit it. That night, Joanne curled up under a hand-knit blanket in the living room, soup reheated and a candle burning beside her. Cedarwood, her favorite. She turned on a playlist she hadn't touched in years. Old soul, soft jazz, nothing that reminded her of Michael. As she sipped, she glanced at the wall calendar. Tuesday was circled now. She smiled to herself, then picked up the pen and wrote 2 more words in her journal. Chapter 1. Joanne sat at the kitchen counter, staring at her phone like it was a stranger who'd long overstayed its welcome. No name, just the bare number. 10 digits, no warmth. The same one that had buzzed through 6 hospital days and 3 silent birthdays. The same one that hadn't been used to check on her ribs, or her release, or her damn pulse. Her thumb hovered. She scrolled through the settings, tapped the number, and slid the toggle switch to gray. Blocked. Permanently. She didn't flinch. She didn't pause to think what-ifs or someday mays. There were no explanations owed. She owed nothing to ghosts who refused to show up living. That afternoon, she walked into a strip mall corner store and bought a prepaid phone. Cheap plastic. A plan so basic it might as well have come with training wheels. The clerk scanned the box without making eye contact. For emergencies? No, Joanne said, slipping her credit card across the counter. For everything that matters. She only shared the new number with 4 people. Nina, Grant, her primary care physician, and the Ridgeway Foundation contact she'd met last week. That was it. No digital photos. No cloud backup. Just a number that didn't carry history like a virus. Back home, she cleaned out the old phone, wiped photos, cleared texts, deleted every thread that had sat unanswered for months. Then she powered it down for the last time. It wasn't symbolic, it was functional. History was a heavy app, and Joanne was done running it in the background. At her desk, she opened a fresh folder labeled Letters I'll Never Send. It was Nina's idea, half joking during lunch. If you're going to do the journaling thing, make it spicy. Write to the people who'd choke if they actually read it. Joanne liked the sound of that. The first entry was to Michael. Not to scold him. She'd done enough of that in silence. This one began simply, Dear Michael, I don't know the version of you that forgot me, but I remember the version you abandoned. She wrote for an hour, not bitter, just clean, like draining a wound. The next morning, Grant called with confirmation. Filed, signed, certified. The will, the trust, the POA. It's all active. You could vanish into the woods tomorrow, and it'd hold up in court. Good, Joanne said, tracing the edge of a teacup. How's your wrist after all that signing? He chuckled. Sore. But worth it. I'll send you arthritis cream as a thank you. Please don't, they both laughed. Brief, real. Before he hung up, his voice softened. I meant to say, it's rare to see someone actually go through with it. The full cut. Most people bluff, soften, rewrite before it's final. I'm not most people, Joanne said. No, he replied. You're the one they'll regret underestimating. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just said, Thanks. Later, she and Nina sat on the porch with notepads and coffee. Early fall clung to the breeze, cool enough to carry the smell of damp earth and cedar mulch. I met with Ridgeway again, Nina said, flipping her notebook open. You can start a named fund. No red tape, just a single donation and a statement of purpose. Joanne blinked. I can name it. Of course, it's your legacy. Joanne took a sip of her coffee. The mug had a faint crack through the handle. Another thing she wasn't ready to throw out. What would I even call it, she asked. Nina leaned back in her chair. You'll know when it's time. That evening, after dinner, the prepaid phone lit up for the first time. A voicemail. No caller ID, no name, just a timestamp. 6:41 p.m. Joanne stared at the screen for a long time before tapping play. Michael's voice crackled through. I don't know what this is. Some performance? Some punishment? You're being unfair, Mom. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. I've been busy. I've been managing things. That doesn't mean I don't care. You've always made everything about you. And now you're doing it again. Pause. Whatever. I hope you're happy. She sat there, frozen. The voice was familiar, but the message was foreign, sharp, resentful, echoing with a self-righteousness that made her skin tighten. Nina walked into the room. You okay? Joanne set the phone down. Screen facing the table. He left a voicemail. Nina's face darkened. Do I need to hear it? No, Joanne said. But I needed to. The next morning, Joanne played the voicemail one last time. She sat in her reading chair, hands folded neatly in her lap, as Michael's voice dripped from the prepaid phone's tiny speaker, entitled Impatient, bruised with performative concern. I've been managing things. That doesn't mean I don't care. You've always made everything about you. I hope you're happy. No apology, no ownership. Just noise wrapped in accusation. She didn't cry, didn't even blink. When it ended, she tapped delete without hesitation. The silence afterward felt sharper, but somehow cleaner. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up her hospital account, logged in, navigated to her emergency contact preferences, and clicked remove next to his name. A red warning box popped up. Are you sure you want to delete this contact? This cannot be undone. Joanne hit confirm, then she added Nina, triple-checked her cell number, and closed the tab. It was the last institutional string connecting her to Michael, now severed. Later, Nina arrived with a small stack of forms and a neutral expression. No pressure, she said, setting them down. But you mentioned this last week. Joanne glanced down. Funeral directive. Nothing fancy, she said. Just clear. I want clean lines, not confusion. Nina nodded, already pulling out a pen. I'll walk you through it. Together they filled out each section. No flowers, no formal viewing. Private cremation, music optional, but not sentimental. She wanted her name remembered, not staged. When they got to executor of final arrangements, Joanne didn't hesitate. Nina, she said. It should be you. Nina froze for half a second. You sure? I'm not putting that weight on someone who's never lifted it before. Nina exhaled, her hand steady as she signed. That afternoon, Joanne received a text. Kelsey, again. This time, it was different. I know I've been part of the distance. I won't pretend otherwise. I'd like to visit, not to fix things, just to show up. Joanne read it twice, then replied, Come tomorrow, lunch, noon. The next day, she set the table for two. Ceramic plates, linen napkins, nothing fancy, but nothing disposable either. She reheated a casserole Nina had dropped off, lit a rosemary candle, and left the door cracked open so Kelsey wouldn't have to knock. At 11:58, she heard the quiet shuffle of shoes on the porch. Kelsey stepped in slowly, holding a paper bag. Lemon bars, from that place in Maplewood you used to love. Joanne nodded toward the table. Still do. Sit. They ate in easy quiet. Joanne noticed how Kelsey chewed slower now, how she looked up between bites instead of into her phone. No makeup, no performance. Halfway through lunch, Kelsey looked up and said, I don't blame you. Joanne raised an eyebrow. For what? For drawing the line, Kelsey said. For choosing peace. Joanne didn't reply right away. She just sipped her water and let the words settle. Michael, Kelsey added softly. He's not going to understand. He's stuck in the version of you he's created. The one who keeps giving, Joanne nodded once. I stopped giving to be remembered. I started keeping to be whole, Kelsey smiled faintly. You still write like that in those journals? Joanne smiled back. Sharper now. They shared lemon bars on the patio afterward. The air rich with early autumn. No tension, no tiptoeing. Just two women sifting through shared absence. As Kelsey stood to leave, she paused at the door. I don't want to be lumped into what he did, she said. I want to be the one who shows up. Joanne didn't offer a promise. She didn't deflect. She just said, then keep showing up. Kelsey nodded, quiet, real. And then she was gone. The envelope arrived by courier, no return address, just Grant's office logo embossed faintly in silver. Joanne opened it at the kitchen table, slow and methodical, as if the paper inside might bite. Inside was a formal letter, thick stock paper. Grant's signature at the bottom. Per client instruction, all requests for contact or disclosure from Michael Farrell or any third party acting on his behalf are to be denied. No documentation will be released. No details confirmed. The estate plan is legally sealed, and the client has requested that no further outreach be made. She read it again, then again. There were no apologies in it. No sentiment, just structure, a wall in writing. She folded the letter neatly, slid it into a file marked Estate Final, and tucked it in her desk drawer. She didn't need to look at it again, but it needed to exist. For him, for the version of him that might try to knock one more time. The next morning, she drove to First Capital Bank on Elm Street. She hadn't been inside in nearly 4 years. The vault room smelled the same, metallic, stale, over-air conditioned. Her safe deposit box was in the second row, middle shelf. Box 206. She slid her key in, twisted. Inside, her original will, an expired passport, and a photo of her mother she hadn't looked at since 2008. She added the new packet, updated will trust documents, POA assignment, funeral directive legacy letter, all sealed, clipped, dated. Joanne closed the lid and locked it again. The weight of the key in her hand was less symbolic now, more practical. This wasn't a secret anymore. It was a record. Later, back home, Nina stopped by with 2 coffees and a quiet look. "I got your text," she said, setting the cups down. "Grant looped me in." Joanne handed her the extra copy of the legal letter. "Read it." Nina sat at the dining table, skimming silently. When she finished, she placed it gently on the table like it was glass. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "Sad, but beautifully final." Joanne pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. People think cutting someone off is cruel, but most of the time, it's just closure they weren't expecting. Nina studied her face. "You okay?" Joanne's smile was brief. "I didn't cut him off. He drifted. I just stopped waving from shore." Nina nodded, quiet. They didn't speak for a while. The sound of the wind outside did all the talking. Dry leaves skimming across the porch, a branch tapping lightly against the window pane like a visitor who wouldn't wait. That evening, Joanne dressed in navy. Not black, not gray, navy. Clean lines, modest heels. Her mother's old pearl earrings. She drove herself to the Ridgeway Hospital Foundation Gala, held in the glass atrium downtown. No one recognized her as she entered, and that was exactly what she wanted. At the donation table, the woman in pearls and a headset smiled brightly. "Are you here to make a pledge, Mrs.?" Joanne slid the card across the table. Donor Joanne S. Marston, not Farrell, not even a hyphen. Her maiden name, clean, uninherited. The woman typed quickly. "And would you like to be listed as anonymous?" Joanne shook her head. "No. List me." The woman smiled. "Of course." She handed Joanne a small silver ribbon and gestured toward the reception area. "Thank you for supporting elder advocacy tonight, Ms. Marston." Joanne pinned the ribbon to her dress and stepped inside. A string quartet played near the atrium entrance. Waiters moved through the crowd with white wine and artichoke crostini. Joanne took neither. Instead, she walked quietly along the edge of the room, scanning the donor board on the far wall. Dozens of names in cursive gold, etched under "in memory of" or "in honor of." Next quarter, hers would be added, but not under anyone else's name. Not even as mother of. Just Joanne Marston. For the elderly who died in silence, in waiting, in rooms their children never entered. As she stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her phone buzzed once. A text. From Nina. He called the office. Grant declined. He said Michael sounded stunned. Joanne turned the phone face down on the ledge beside her champagne flute. Outside, the city lights blinked on, one by one, as if confirming something she already knew. Joanne was pulling weeds from the side garden when her landline rang. The old one, the number listed in the church directory, but nowhere else. She let it go to voicemail. Then checked the message 10 minutes later, soil still under her fingernails. "Hi, Joe. It's Denise from the Ridgeway Women's Book Club. I didn't want to stir anything, but I saw a Facebook post this morning from your son. It's public. Thought you should know. No other details. No forwarded link. Joanne didn't ask for them. She wiped her hands on a towel, went inside, and made tea. Nina arrived just after lunch with a frozen lasagna and her phone already in her hand. You want to see it? Joanne shook her head. Not remotely. Nina hesitated. It's bad. Not slander exactly, but full martyr. He's painting you like a ghost who left him. Joanne sat down with her tea. Of course he is. He doesn't know any stories where he's not the victim. Nina scrolled briefly, then sighed. It's got comments, shares. Some woman called you a tragic soul with no family. Joanne raised an eyebrow. Strange. I thought you were family. You're not tragic either. Exactly, Joanne said. So let him. His audience is shrinking. Nina sat beside her. You sure? Michael's playing his last card. Sympathy. It's what's left when control fails. Joanne took another sip of tea. Let the heat steady her. He can keep posting. I'm too old to babysit tantrums in grown-up packaging. Later that night, Joanne opened her laptop and pulled up a file she hadn't touched in years. Obituary draft. Personal copy. It still listed Michael. Still framed her life through the lens of motherhood and widowhood, the roles she once believed she was supposed to lead with. She deleted the second paragraph entirely, then began to rewrite. Joanne S. Marston passed peacefully, leaving behind a legacy of advocacy, independence, and words that never asked permission. She taught journaling to women who thought they were invisible, and wrote letters no one expected her to send. She is survived by the choices she made bravely, and the silence she reclaimed deliberately. Per her instructions, no service, no notice to estranged parties, no contact list beyond her named executor. There will be no exception. Joanne stared at the screen, then saved the file, then printed a copy for her estate folder. No anger, no drama, just clarity. 2 days later, Denise from the book club called again. He posted another one, she said, her voice low. This one ends with, prayers appreciated as I continue to navigate the loss of a relationship I still don't understand. Joanne didn't flinch. She thanked Denise, then hung up. She didn't need prayers from strangers who hadn't asked what happened. She didn't need Michael's curated grief, served in filtered squares and captioned martyrdom. She needed peace and space, and she had both. That weekend, she and Nina returned to the community center for journaling class. A new woman joined, mid-50s, too quiet, sleeves tugged low. The instructor offered a prompt. Write the goodbye you never gave. Joanne glanced sideways at Nina, who gave her a nod. Joanne wrote 2 lines. I raised you once. I won't do it again. She didn't cry, didn't fold the paper, just slipped it into her folder where it belonged. The next morning, Joanne updated her folder's cover label to Legacy and Closure finalized. She left a note inside for Nina, tucked between pages. If you're reading this, it means I got out while the garden was still blooming. Don't let them edit me, don't let them rename me, and don't, under any circumstances, give them my ending. That afternoon, a new message pinged in her inbox. Subject line, a quiet apology, from Kelsey. Joanne didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she walked to the garden, pulled on her gloves, and knelt among the rosemary and lavender. There was nothing left to delete, but there was still so much left to grow. Joanne sat across from the hospital administrator, the stale scent of institutional coffee thick in the air. A privacy screen buzzed gently behind the receptionist, and the overhead lights cast everything in that familiar beige haze hospitals never seem to escape. A copy of her ID sat between them. The woman, mid-40s, professional but warm, reviewed the file on her screen with mild surprise. You've already updated your emergency contacts, health proxy, and power of attorney, she said. Everything now points to Nina Elwood. Joanne nodded. I just want to confirm it's reflected in every level of my chart. Not just the main profile. The woman clicked through several tabs, then nodded again. Yes, it's all been propagated system-wide. Add password protections to all access, Joanne said. Any call claiming to be a family member must provide it, or be denied. Of course, the woman said, typing as she spoke. Would you like to create a new one? Joanne paused. 3 words. The woman waited. Not his right. There was a brief flicker across the woman's face. Maybe surprise, maybe understanding. But she simply typed it in and said, done. Later that afternoon, back at the house, Joanne signed the final page of the protection addendum Grant had couriered that morning. Nina watched her from across the kitchen table. This is the last legal loophole? Grant's voice came through on speakerphone. Yes. This addendum makes it clear that even posthumous requests for estate review are barred if the party was legally excluded during life. It's rare, but it holds. Joanne slid the pen across the table. Seal it. File it. Grant's voice softened. Consider it airtight. Joanne glanced toward the living room, where the afternoon light streaked through the blinds. Cutting across the old armchair where Michael once sat cross-legged as a teenager, flipping through college brochures he never applied to. She didn't say a word, just nodded. The connection ended. That evening, the doorbell rang. Kelsey stood on the porch in a windbreaker, holding a paper coffee cup and a hesitant look. Just me. Joanne stepped aside. Come in. They sat in the sunroom. Rain tapped lightly on the skylight, and the house smelled like the rosemary candle Nina had left last week. I won't stay long, Kelsey said, setting the coffee down. I just wanted to clear the air. Joanne waited. He says you've been manipulated, Kelsey said. That Nina's poisoning your mind against him. That you've cut him out because someone got to you. Joanne didn't laugh. She didn't frown. She simply tilted her head, letting the weight of the words land without reaction. Kelsey rushed to add, I told him that was ridiculous, that you were clearer now than I've ever seen you. Joanne finally spoke. This isn't manipulation. It's unburdening. Kelsey looked down. He's unraveling, quietly, but it's happening. He's grasping at anything that makes you the reason for the fracture. Joanne folded her hands. Let him grasp. I spent years giving him ropes to climb back in. He always turned them into nooses. Kelsey swallowed hard. He's asking people to intervene. I know, Joanne said. They won't. Kelsey looked up. How can you be so sure? Joanne leaned forward, her voice calm. Because the people who know me don't need my obituary to explain my choices. After Kelsey left, Joanne returned to the kitchen and opened her legacy and closure folder. She slipped in a final document, the confirmation receipt from Grant's office. Addendum filed. Control terminated. She closed the folder and placed it back in the desk drawer. The house was quiet, but not empty. That night, as wind scraped lightly across the windows, her prepaid phone buzzed. A voicemail. She didn't recognize the number. She didn't press play. She deleted it, immediately. Then she walked to the hall closet, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the same shoebox from weeks ago. Michael's baby photo was still inside. She looked at it for a long moment, then placed it in a sealed envelope, labeled, Return to Sender, unopened. She left it at the door for tomorrow's mail. The binder lay flat on the dining table, its spine perfectly aligned with the grain of the wood. Joanne sat in front of it with the quiet care of someone about to reread her own ending. Thick leather cover, brass corners. Tabs organized by Grant. Legal, medical, financial, personal. Estate execution packet. J.S. Marston, final. She opened it. The first few pages were technical, notarized, dated, stamped. She skimmed them without emotion. This part wasn't about grief anymore. It was about clarity. The next tab, beneficiaries. She paused. There it was. Primary, Nina Elwood. Executor, health proxy, full authority. Secondary, Kelsey Farrell. Trust-controlled disbursement. With maturity clause, tertiary. Ridgeway Foundation, endowment beneficiary. Restricted use, no Michael. No fallback line. No legally protected what-ifs. The ink was dark, permanent, unsentimental. His name had once appeared 7 times across her original estate documents. Now it appeared nowhere, not even in the fine print. Joanne exhaled through her nose. It didn't feel like erasure, it felt like alignment. She flipped to the final tab and pulled out the last slip of paper tucked in the back pocket. Grant's handwritten note, all terms executed. All protections sealed. GW Joanne added her own sticky note beneath it in pen. Locked. Final, not for revision. She closed the binder, clicked the strap, and walked it to the safe in her bedroom closet. The metal dial turned like muscle memory. Click, turn, seal. She returned to the sunroom, the notebook waiting for her on the armrest. Letters I'll never send. She'd filled it with confessions, apologies, and endings never spoken aloud. Mostly to Michael, but today's letter wasn't for him. She opened to the last page, began writing, "Dear Joanne, you gave yourself the closure no one else offered. You stopped waiting for return calls that were never coming. You stopped earning space in hearts that kept shrinking. And you didn't do it to punish. You did it to breathe. You didn't cut them out. You just stopped shrinking to fit. You kept growing anyway." She signed it simply, J, no last name, no role. Just a woman who had finally taken herself seriously. She folded the page and slid it into a small cedar box on the bookshelf. Next to it was the sealed envelope she'd labeled days earlier. Michael, returned to sender, unopened. She hadn't changed her mind. The garden was humming outside. Joanne stepped out barefoot, letting the flagstone guide her through rosemary, lavender, and wild thyme. The late afternoon sun dusted everything in amber light. Bees hovered low. A squirrel darted across the fence. She walked the entire loop, slow, steady, past the bird bath, past the fig tree that hadn't fruited in years, past the stone bench she used to sit on when Michael was still small enough to ask for her stories. Now she wrote her own. When she returned to the porch, Nina was waiting. One hand held a paper bag. The other held up her phone like a toast. "I brought the world's worst coffee and a clearance hydrangea." "Which do you want first?" Joanne laughed softly. "Hydrangea, obviously." They sat on the porch, sipping and watching the wind shake the trees. After a while, Nina leaned back. "So, now that it's all signed, sealed, and safe, what comes next?" Joanne didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands, steady, sun-warmed, then up at the garden still growing around her. She smiled. "Now?" Nina nodded. Joanne turned her face to the light and said, "Now I live like none of it ever needed his permission." The hospital smelled different when Joanne returned. Less like bleach, more like lavender and soft cafeteria muffins. Or maybe it was her. Maybe absence had filtered her memory into sharper contrasts. She checked in at the volunteer desk wearing her Ridgeway name badge on a plain lanyard. White blouse, no jewelry, short sleeves to let the sunlight touch her. "Room 214, the volunteer coordinator said. "Mrs. Henley, stroke recovery. She loves stories." Joanne nodded. "So do I." The elevator ride up felt short. The kind of short that happens when you're not carrying old weight. She tapped the door frame gently before stepping in. "Hi, I'm Joanne," she said with a soft smile. "I'm here to read if you'd like." Mrs. Henley looked up from her bed with mild suspicion. "You a nurse?" "No, ma'am. Just someone who knows what it's like to be in a room like this and not know who's coming." Mrs. Henley blinked slowly, then nodded once. Joanne opened the journal she'd brought and read from a chapter she'd written last month. A fictional tale about a woman who buried her regret beneath a rosemary bush and let it grow into forgiveness. When she finished, Mrs. Henley whispered, "That smells like my mother's garden." Joanne smiled. "Mine too." By the end of the week, she'd joined the Thursday morning walking group. 5 women between 60 and 78 who took their steps around the outer perimeter of Lincoln Park like it was sacred ground. None of them asked about Joanne's past. They just walked and shared lemon water and warned each other about uneven bricks. They gave her a nickname by week 3, Hawkeye, for the way she always spotted squirrels before anyone else. It felt stupid, and it felt good. Joanne's first official journaling session at Ridgeway Hospital happened on a Wednesday afternoon. They gave her the small classroom near the recovery wing, whiteboard in the front, folding chairs in a circle, coffee in a percolator so old it hissed like it had something to say. She wrote the day's prompt in green marker on the board. Write the goodbye that healed you instead of haunted you. 7 women and 1 man showed up. Some were patients, some were caregivers. One had simply seen the flyer and wandered in with a cane and a notebook that looked older than the hospital. Joanne didn't read aloud this time. She just walked the circle, encouraged, listened, offered more paper when needed. At the end, someone asked, "Do you actually work here?" Joanne shook her head. "No, I live here though, now." They all laughed. So did she. The 4th week, Kelsey showed up. She slipped into the back row 5 minutes late, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt with no makeup, no pretext, just a pen and notebook. Joanne clocked her but didn't pause the lesson. Afterward, Kelsey waited until the others had left before approaching. "That was incredible," she said. "You're more alive now than I've ever seen." Joanne gave a small shrug. "That's what happens when you stop waiting for a call back." Kelsey didn't push, just nodded and left with a quiet wave. Progress, Joanne thought. Not peace, maybe, but progress. One afternoon, the hospital held a small donor ceremony in the atrium. No gala this time, just coffee and name plaques on the freshly updated donor wall. Joanne stood at the edge of the group as a staff member read names aloud in a voice too formal for the crowd. When they got to hers, the reader paused slightly. Joanne S. Marston, for ongoing community advocacy and recovery programming. She stepped forward, accepted a small pin, and shook the woman's hand. The applause was gentle, respectful. Nina snapped a photo from the back of the room, grinning behind her phone. Later that evening, they looked at the photo together on the porch. "You look taller," Nina said. "I feel taller," Joanne replied. Nina sipped her iced tea. "So what now?" Joanne tilted her head. "I keep going." "Anywhere in particular?" Joanne looked out across the yard. The fig tree had new leaves. "Yeah," she said. "Forward." Joanne found the envelope tucked between her Ridgeway volunteer handbook and the latest community bulletin. No return address, just her name, written in soft blue ink. Not the digital kind, but actual penmanship. The kind people used when they meant it. She carried it into the kitchen like it might be fragile, set it on the counter, boiled water, waited for the tea to steep. Only then did she open it. Inside was a single page. Neat handwriting, a little rushed but unmistakably earnest. "Joanne, I've written and erased this 4 times, so I'm sending the version that's messiest, but truest. Thank you. For not pretending it didn't hurt, for standing your ground, for making space even when none was owed. I see that now. I know I didn't call. I know I was part of the silence, and I can't fix that. But I can promise you this. I'll be the one who answers the phone. I'll be the one who shows up, not out of guilt, but because I finally understand the cost of absence. With all the honesty I owe you." Kelsey Joanne sat down, the letter still in hand. Her throat tightened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't groveling. It was the first real thing she'd received in a long, long time. And for the first time since the fall, tears slipped down her cheeks. Not because she'd been abandoned, but because someone had returned without being asked. Not fully, not perfectly, but with clarity. She folded the letter gently and slipped it into the cedar box next to her own final journal entry. Then she stood, pulled out a mixing bowl, and opened the pantry. She had just enough peaches left. By late afternoon, the kitchen smelled like cinnamon, butter, and toasted sugar. She let the cobbler cool while she changed. Nothing formal, just a clean sweater and jeans that didn't make her feel like someone's mother or patient or problem. She wrapped the cobbler in foil, placed it in a woven basket, and drove 2 neighborhoods over to Nina's. Nina answered barefoot, holding a laundry basket and looking stunned. "Did you commit a felony or bake something?" Joanne lifted the basket. "I plead delicious." They sat at the dining table, the cobbler steaming between them. Nina took a bite and groaned. "God, you could have weaponized this." "It's a thank you," Joanne said softly, "for showing up, for staying, for giving me a space to be more than someone's regret." Nina raised her fork. "This your version of a farewell tour?" Joanne shook her head. "No, this is my thank you tour." They ate in companionable silence until Nina reached for the tea kettle. "Should we toast?" Joanne tilted her head. "To what?" Nina poured 2 mismatched mugs and handed one over. "To clean exits," she said, "and better returns." Joanne clinked mugs with her. "Amen." That night back home, Joanne opened her old desktop backup drive, the clunky gray one she kept for emergencies. She scrolled past a dozen archived files until she found the contact backup folder. There it was, Michael's number, last saved 2 years ago. She hovered for only a moment, then clicked delete. A message popped up. "Are you sure? This cannot be undone." Joanne smiled faintly and clicked yes. After, she made herself a cup of mint tea, opened her front window to the night air, and watched as 2 raccoons wandered across the yard like tiny burglars. She didn't feel angry or broken or afraid, just lighter. In the cedar box, her last note had been addressed to herself. Now it shared space with one addressed to her. Not from an old version of love, but a new one, unearthed gently. The wind pushed through the trees outside, and somewhere far off, a dog barked at nothing. Joanne reached for a clean page in her journal and wrote only this: "I was never asking to be chased. I was just waiting for someone to arrive without being summoned." She closed the journal. Tomorrow she'd return to Ridgeway with a new prompt, one about grace. But tonight she let herself be held, not by memory or pain, but by quiet recognition. Grant's letter arrived midweek. Crisp envelope, pale gray watermark. No fanfare. Joanne didn't bother sitting down. She read it standing barefoot in her kitchen, her thumb pressing gently against the edge of the countertop with each sentence. Client Joanne S. Marston affirms all prior declarations. All estate designations are final and protected. Any challenge, inquiry, or request from Michael Farrell is preemptively denied. No access granted. No contest permitted. That was the language she liked. Uncluttered, unapologetic, not vindictive, just finished. She folded the letter with clinical precision and slipped it into the black binder marked Legacy. Beneath the addendum, Grant had called the legal deadbolt. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Nina. "Ready?" she said. Nina's voice was steady. "I'll meet you in 10. They filmed the video in Joanne's sunroom, with the late light sliding through the windows in slanted gold. The camera sat propped on a small tripod beside the journal stack, facing Joanne head-on. Nina adjusted the angle slightly. "You good?" Joanne nodded. "Record." The red light blinked. "My name is Joanne S. Marston," she said clearly. "I am of sound mind and full legal authority. This recording is made by choice, with no coercion." She breathed. "My will has been updated. My trusts are designated. My executor is Nina Elwood. My secondary beneficiary is Kelsey Farrell, with structured conditions. Michael Farrell has been fully and permanently removed from all documents, benefits, access points, and directives." Her voice didn't crack. She looked directly into the lens. "I make no apologies. I waited longer than I should have. I gave chances I didn't owe. I made the calls. I left the messages. And when none were returned, I answered for myself." She held the stare for 2 seconds longer, then nodded once. "End recording." Nina clicked stop. The room held its breath for a beat. Joanne whispered, "Save it. Back it up twice." Later that afternoon, she visited Ridgeway to see the new donor plaque. It had been added just beneath the atrium's central skylight, engraved in soft brass, Joanne S. Marston. For those who show up, no titles, no roles, just the truth. A staffer walking by paused and smiled. "It's perfect," she said. "You picked that line?" Joanne didn't correct her. "Yes, I did." At home, her prepaid phone buzzed once. No name, no context. A voicemail, blinking quietly. She didn't hesitate. She deleted it without listening. No curiosity, no regret, no last thread to examine. It wasn't courage. It was closure. That evening, Nina and Kelsey took her out to dinner. A local spot with uneven floors and too much charm. Joanne wore earrings for the first time in weeks. They ordered pasta, shared one bottle of wine, and left room for dessert. No one brought up the past. No one danced around it either. The air between them felt like something rebuilt, not repaired. Like a bridge that didn't just get patched, but rerouted entirely. At one point, between bites of lemon cake, Kelsey said softly, "You know, it's still weird not seeing his name next to yours." Joanne dabbed her napkin at her lip. "It was only there out of habit." Kelsey nodded. "Still." "I'm glad you rewrote it." Joanne met her eyes. "Me too." They clinked glasses. Sweet tea for Joanne, Pinot for the other two. And Nina said, "To the woman who knew how to end a chapter." Joanne smiled. "To clean exits," she replied. When she returned home, she changed into slippers, turned on the porch light, and opened the windows one last time before fall took the breeze away for good. In her bedroom, she placed the binder, the video drive, and the cedar box into a fireproof chest, not because she feared loss, but because what she'd built now deserved protection. As she pulled the covers back and slid into bed, she glanced at the final journal entry tucked into the edge of her nightstand. She'd scrawled it earlier that morning, after reading Grant's letter. One line only. "While I was admitted in the hospital, I called my son for 2 days, and he ignored every call. So I disconnected him from my will forever. No metaphor, no literary echo. Just fact." She turned off the light and let the silence be hers.